$14 billion. That's how much value evaporated from FTX in 9 days, and almost none of it was ever really there. Sam Bankman-Fried built the second largest crypto exchange in the world on a single promise: that customer deposits were safe, segregated, and untouched. Court records show they were being lent to his private trading firm the entire time. The question this story has to answer is how a 30-year-old MIT grad convinced some of the sharpest investors on Earth to hand him $32 billion in valuation, while running what federal prosecutors would later call one of the largest financial frauds in American history. FTX launched in May 2019, founded by Bankman-Fried and his co-founder Gary Wang in the Bahamas. The pitch was clean, a sophisticated exchange built for professional traders, with a native token called FTT that gave holders fee discounts and a stake in the platform's growth. By 2021, the exchange had raised $1.8 billion across multiple funding rounds. Sequoia Capital was in, Tiger Global was in, Temasek, the Singaporean sovereign wealth fund, was in. The Series C round in November 2021 put FTX's valuation at $32 billion. Bankman-Fried was everywhere. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen took equity stakes and filmed ads. Shaquille O'Neal signed on. The Miami Heat Arena got renamed the FTX Arena for $135 million over 19 years. SBF testified before Congress on crypto regulation, donated heavily to political campaigns on both sides, and positioned himself as the adult in the room while the rest of the crypto industry was burning down around him. When Terra and Luna collapsed in May 2022, wiping out roughly $40 billion in market cap in 72 hours, FTX survived. When Celsius and Voyager Digital filed for bankruptcy in June 2022, SBF announced a $250 million rescue fund. The press called him the JP Morgan of crypto, the guy who'd stabilize the whole sector. Sequoia published a fawning profile that called him a once-in-a-generation genius, and none of them knew what Gary Wang had already built into the code. Wang, the quiet co-founder who designed FTX's technical infrastructure, had written a backdoor into the exchange's risk engine. Alameda Research, SBF's separate trading firm run by 28-year-old Caroline Ellison, had been given a special borrowing privilege that no other account on the platform had. It could run a negative balance without triggering automatic liquidation. In plain terms, Alameda could borrow from FTX's customer deposit pool, and the system wouldn't flag it. Wang later admitted in his guilty plea that he knew it was wrong. He did it anyway. By the time FTX filed for bankruptcy, Alameda owed the exchange $10 billion in customer funds. That number is worth sitting with. $10 billion moved from accounts belonging to retail investors and institutions, funneled into a private trading firm with no disclosure and no consent. The money didn't just sit there. $5 billion of that $10 billion was lent back out personally to Bankman-Fried himself, according to court filings. $1 billion in a single transaction. Another $500 million went to Anthropic, the AI startup. $250 million went to political donations. Over $100 million went to real estate in the Bahamas. The customers whose deposits funded all of this had no idea any of it was happening. Alameda's balance sheet, the document that would eventually detonate everything, showed $14.6 billion in total assets. Roughly $8 billion of that was FTT, FTX's own native token. The same token FTX was issuing, pricing, and promoting. Alameda was using FTX's own currency as collateral to justify borrowing FTX's customers' money. The entire structure depended on FTT holding its value. The moment that token dropped, the collateral evaporated, the loans lost their backing, and $8 billion in customer deposits simply didn't exist anymore. That's the structure, a circular dependency so fragile that that a single tweet could bring it down. On November 6, 2022, Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of Binance, posted that his exchange would be liquidating its entire FTT position, worth roughly $580 million. Zhao had no insider knowledge of what was happening at FTX. He was making a routine risk management decision after CoinDesk had published a leaked version of Alameda's balance sheet 4 days earlier. The tweet was 4 words and a number. It was enough. FTT dropped 25% in hours. Customers who'd seen the CoinDesk story started connecting the dots and requesting withdrawals. On November 8th alone, customers submitted $6 billion in withdrawal requests. FTX couldn't cover them. SBF posted on Twitter that FTX had a liquidity crunch, then quietly halted withdrawals. Zhao briefly offered to acquire FTX, spent 1 day on due diligence, and walked away. On November 11, 2022, FTX filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 9 days from the first tweet to the end, John J. Ray III, the restructuring expert brought in to manage the bankruptcy, had previously overseen the Enron collapse. He'd seen corporate fraud up close. His assessment of FTX was still blunt enough to stop the room. "Never in my career," Ray wrote in court filings, "have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information." Ray's reports documented the systematic transfer of customer funds with forensic precision, and they became the structural backbone of the federal prosecution. Caroline Ellison, who had run Alameda and had direct email chains with Bankman-Fried authorizing the transfers, pleaded guilty and agreed to testify. She told the court she'd been instructed that the borrowing was necessary to prevent a market crash, and that she'd believed she was acting in the company's best interests. The jury didn't find that credible as a defense, and neither did the math. She knew the money wasn't backed by real assets. She moved it anyway. SBF's own defense was that he hadn't realized how bad things had gotten, that his risk models had failed, that this was negligence rather than intent. The prosecution argued the opposite, that the backdoor in the code, the undisclosed loans, the circular FTT collateral, and the personal billion-dollar withdrawal all pointed to deliberate misappropriation from the start. In November 2023, after a month-long trial in the Southern District of New York, the jury convicted Bankman-Fried on all 7 counts, including wire fraud and conspiracy. In March 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years and ordered to forfeit $11 billion. The bankruptcy estate has recovered somewhere between $7 and $8 billion through asset sales and clawbacks, including the Anthropic stake and the Bahamas real estate. Customers may ultimately recover 85 to 90 cents on the dollar, which is an unusually high recovery rate for exchange fraud, and only possible because SBF had parked stolen money in assets that held value. The 371 employees who joined FTX in its final 18 months on the promise of $32 billion equity grants got nothing. What made FTX different from a standard Ponzi wasn't the scale, it was the architecture. The fraud was built into the code from nearly the beginning, invisible to auditors, invisible to investors, and invisible to customers who'd specifically chosen FTX because its founder was the one telling Congress how to regulate crypto. The safest exchange in the space was the one that had already spent their money.